Being a football fan means experiencing some of the most intense emotions a human being can possibly feel, regardless of how passionate we are. Football moves us in many ways, whether it's a moment of rage when our team drops points, or our striker misses an open goal, sadness when we witness our team lose or our favorite stars retire, or excitement when somehow we come back from a losing position to win a match. Even so, there is also something else which the beautiful game is capable of provoking in us. A reaction which makes us grin, chuckle, or shake our heads at the ridiculousness of the situation. We're talking about the funny moments in football that are as silly as they are unbelievable. Those moments in which we were left sitting there with a WTF expression at what we'd just seen. Let's face it, every footballer is a character of his own, each with the ability to make terrible and silly mistakes on and off the pitch, which we can laugh at or feel sorry about, depending on how bad it ended up for him in the end. But when it comes to these crazy, funniest real-life football stories, we promise you'll be holding onto your sides and rolling on the floor from one wall to another once you've finished watching this video. Starting off with one of the craziest things you'll hear, we have the famous case of the Danish side Ebeltoft, who faced Norwich in what was an already exciting match until something even more insane happened. Just as the final seconds of the match arrived and the referee lifted his whistle to blow for full time, his false teeth came flying out of his mouth. Even worse than the fact that he had to go running back for them to officially end the game was that Ebeltoft scored a last-minute goal to equalize at 4-4, leading them to celebrate like crazy. Unfortunately, the referee shook his head and disallowed the goal. He had found his teeth and put them back and informed Ebeltoft that the match had already ended a few seconds before they'd scored. Cruel. Surely that's the weirdest thing to happen in football? Nope, because the controversial Robbie Savage has a funny story that will make you laugh your head off. Once, after having been caught in a hard tackle, the Birmingham City midfielder was brought into the hospital to be checked for a concussion or any other major damage. As the doctor made sure he was okay, he asked Robbie if he knew the name of United Kingdom's Prime Minister. Annoyed with the questions, Savage waved the health specialist away with, "I don't know." It was the worst thing he could have said. The doctor diagnosed a concussion, laying the footballer down and keeping him at the hospital overnight. This event would cause many people to make fun of an apparently clueless Robbie Savage, who seemingly had no idea that the Prime Minister was named Tony Blair. Talking of clues, Yaya Toure once told a story that will make you see the big, powerful, and hard-to-please midfielder in another light. Having played at FC Barcelona before joining the new-look city that would go on to become a powerhouse in the English Premier League, Yaya remembered the time when he was afraid of Messi. What? Afraid of Messi? Yes, believe it or not, the giant Toure became terrified of the diminutive Argentine after Messi threatened him. With a nutmeg? Truly enough, back in the day, Lionel Messi would jokingly threaten his teammates with nutmegging them in training and would always follow through with his promise. Yaya had been safe from these threats until one day Messi approached him in the locker room saying, "Today, you'll be the victim." After watching Messi nutmeg 2 players that same day and praying all the while that he wouldn't be next, especially with his family watching him, the training session ended. Yaya was safe. However, he never forgot that event and still tells the tale today. But talking about Messi anyway, you have ever heard of how his youth coach got him to score more headers while getting him into better physical shape? No? Apparently, Messi was in love with alfajores. It's a delicious sweet sandwich made of 2 coconut-sprinkled cookies with dulce de leche in between them, and couldn't stop eating them all day, every day. His coach, who initially had rewarded Messi for his goals with alfajores, began to look worryingly at his young star. Since Leo couldn't stop scoring goals, he was eating way too much for his own sake. "I had to do something," the coach remembers, so he went for Messi's weakness: headers. He would only give Messi treats when he scored a header, though it now would be 2 alfajores instead of 1. Amazingly, this must have activated Messi's natural talent for headers despite his size, as in the very next game, he dribbled past all of the opposing defenders, dummied past the defender, and, standing in front of the goal, chipped the ball up and headed it in. As his coach watched him with his jaw hanging open, Messi looked at him and lifted 2 fingers. "Dos," he said softly, and continued playing. Moving on, you're probably wondering what other craziness can follow the previous stories, but you wouldn't imagine there was actually a time when a coach was smuggled out of a dressing room hidden inside a laundry basket. During the Champions League, in a quarterfinal, and it was Jose Mourinho. No way! Yep, believe it or not, Jose Mourinho was suspended for Chelsea's 2005 quarterfinal home game against Bayern, but he was desperate to show up at the match and give his team a few words of motivation and some ideas to polish their tactics. So, he decided to arrive a bit early and stick around while everyone forgot he was even there. 7 hours early, in fact, while he waited in hiding for his players to arrive. Finally, they came to the dressing room and were surprised to see him there. "What are you doing here, boss?" Many asked, but he began his team talk. They listened closely, and now it was time to leave. Chelsea's kit man, Stuart Bannister, took matters into his own hands. "Get in here," he told Jose, pulling out a laundry basket. Before anyone knew it, Martino was inside the slightly open basket and being escorted out of the stadium. Unfortunately, Stuart was forced to close the basket on Marino's head when UEFA employees walked past, and Jose remembers how he almost died from a panic attack when a serious bout of claustrophobia kicked in. Finally, he was out and safe, vowing never to do it again. The good news? Chelsea went on to beat Bayern 4-2 and won the second leg too, progressing to the semifinals. Even so, there are certain other funny stories that are just plain what the hell material, and which will make you wonder what certain people were thinking when it happened. Like, for example, did you know that a football player was once sold for pork? Yes, believe it or not, it was 1998 in Romania, and a player named Ion Radu was sold by 2nd Division Giul Petrosani to Cimea Ranminția Valencia in exchange for 2 tons of beef and pork. While Giul Petrosani sold all of the food to pay their players' wages, Valsea continued to sink until bankruptcy forced them to dissolve in 2004. Sad ending to an otherwise fun tale. Other players who have been sold in exchange for food include Ernie Blenkinsop, an ex-coal miner who was bought by Hull City for £100 sterling and a barrel of beer, though this humble player eventually grew in stature and became an England international and Liverpool first-team player. Kenneth Christensen, who was exchanged from one Norwegian team to another for a price of 75 kilograms of raw shrimp. Marius Chiora, who was on the verge of being sold for 15 kilograms of sausages before he rage quit, left the country to avoid the humiliation. And finally, a huge surprise in the fact that Manchester United make up the list by having purchased wing half Hugh McClenahan for 3 refrigerators full of ice cream. Yes, ice cream. And yes, Manchester United. Food isn't the craziest thing taking place when it comes to transfers either. The famous Arsenal striker Ian Wright, who scored 185 goals in 288 appearances for the club, was initially purchased by Crystal Palace at the age of 21 for a set of weights. Giulio Petrosani features once more, briefly as they weren't content with 2 tons of meat and decided that selling their player Livio Balsea for 10 footballs was an amazing idea too. Finally, in these wacky transfer stories, we have Zat Knight, who was exchanged from Russ Hall Olympic to Fulham FC for 30 sets of clothes. It would have been a smart trade if Knight hadn't been sold for £3.5 million a few years later. Blunder! Let's face it, sometimes life can be unfair. More unfair for some than others, to be honest, as it shows when we remember the case of Leroy Rossinoir, an ex-Fulham, Queen's Park Rangers, Bristol City and West Ham United striker, as well as Sierra Leone international. Having amassed 272 appearances over a period of 16 years, Rossinoir decided to start a career in football management, starting out with Bristol City's youth team, but he soon got opportunities elsewhere. At one point, he began to manage at Torquay United, where he did well at first, but suffered a relegation that cost the club their best players, and he was sacked. A few other clubs followed, and eventually he got the job he had been expecting in 2007. He would take charge of Sierra Leone, the country he had represented in his brief international career. Things seemed to be getting better, and he was invited to come back to Torquay United on May 17, 2007. It was a happy moment for Rossinoir as he put pen to paper and smiled at the cameras with his new contract. 10 minutes later, though, it was all over. Somebody came in and gave him the terrible news. He'd been sacked. The club had apparently been bought and taken over, and the new owners had no interest in Rossinoir being their manager. Not only was it a massive humiliation and an unwanted record as the manager with the shortest reign in the history of English football, but he also never got a job in football management again. Yeah, we also feel sad for Leroy. But don't, since he's done a great job in combating racism with the Show Racism the Red Card campaign. Anyway, this story has shown us that all things must come to an end, and the same applies to this video. Still, we've got one last crazy, funny, weird, and downright unbelievable story for you, involving a goalkeeper, a jar of salad cream, and incredibly bad luck. Have you ever heard of Dave Beasant? Maybe, maybe not. If you haven't, you probably don't know that his career at Chelsea FC was ended by a seemingly meaningless kitchen accident. You see, Beasant had grown famous for becoming the first goalkeeper ever to save a penalty in an FA Cup final, which he did in 1988 versus Liverpool, leading his side, Wimbledon, to lift the trophy and for the Newcastle United to spend a record £750,000 on him to move to Tyneside. Chelsea came next, and although he had an initially difficult time, it seemed as if he was going to become a legend for the West London club. That is, until 1993, when he decided to prepare a sandwich. Yep, believe it or not, While preparing a delicious sandwich for lunch, Beeson knocked over a 2-kilogram jar of salad cream. His reflexes must have failed him as it fell straight down onto his foot, severing the tendon to his big toe. The result? He missed 8 weeks of the season, was replaced with Dimitri Karine, and never got a game for Chelsea again. He also dropped off in form and never recovered from the incident. A thought for Dave Beeson, whose career was ruined by a jar of salad cream. With nothing else left to say and with your sides already hurting enough as is, we hope you loved this video. Take care and keep tuning in to our channel.